Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Emmert, as this hearing has discussed at considerable length, the states are moving very quickly to establish their own frameworks for name, image, and likeness. You state in your written testimony that, quote, conducting collegiate athletics among a patchwork of state laws is untenable. Why do you believe that we need a federal law to address this issue?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I think, again, this is one of the cruxes of the debate in front of us right now, obviously. There seems to be, at least among the members who have spoken, general agreement that having a singular policy at the federal level will allow all students across the country, whether they have a state law or don't have a state law, to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. Starting July 1st, there will be a dozen or so, depending on what happens in the next couple of weeks, states where student athletes will be able to go on and monetize their name, image, and likeness, and there'll be 30 or so, 35 or so that won't be able to do that. We will have a situation where schools in those other states won't be in the position to be able to recruit as effectively. The student athletes in many of these states will have very different standards that they'll have to be operating under, and the only way that we can get a reconciliation of all of that is by having a single national model.
What do you consider to be the impact on other sports? Presumably the lion's share of the revenue is going to come from the more high-profile sports, from football and basketball and sports that dominate TV coverage. What do you see as the impact of monetizing name, image, and likeness on lower-profile sports, whether sports that are not covered as often on TV or women's programs at various schools?
If Senator, the policy only deals with direct name, image, and likeness and doesn't include a revenue-sharing model, then I think it can have a very positive impact on women and Olympic sports, because it could provide them with greater opportunities to gain access to media markets, to be involved in any of a variety of NIL activities. Indeed, this current year we have softball going on right now. There have been some extraordinary performances that young women would be able to build upon in their social media profiles and potentially monetize. So if crafted properly, I think it could be very, very promising and very supportive of those sports. If conversely, it required a revenue sharing model that took resources away from the dominant sports that produce revenue, it could have, as a number of us have said earlier, it could have a very negative, even cataclysmic impact on Olympic sports.
So I agree with you on the importance of women's sports and girls' sports. I've got two daughters, ages 10 and 13, and my youngest daughter is an avid softball player. And I think it is wonderful, the discipline and teamwork and all of the skills that are developed through participating in athletics. I will say, Dr. Emmert, I am concerned about just how political the NCAA has gotten on the question of transgender athletes. And in particular, on April 12th of this year, the NCAA stated, quote, the NCAA Board of Governors firmly and unequivocally supports the opportunity for transgender student athletes to compete in college sports. And the NCAA further said, when determining where championships are held, NCAA policy directs that only locations where hosts can commit to providing an environment that is safe, healthy, and free of discrimination should be selected. That was a not remotely subtle threat for the NCAA to target and boycott any states where legislatures are acting to protect girls' sports and women's sports. Now, it used to not be controversial to observe that there are biological differences between boys and girls, and when it comes to athletics, there can be significant physical advantages for those who are born biologically male in terms of strength and size, and that's why we have girls' sports and boys' sports and men's sports and women's sports in organized athletics. And the science continues to demonstrate that. Indeed, University of Manchester study indicated that male puberty provides a 10 to 50% physical advantage dependent on the sport, with the gap widest in activities that use muscle mass and explosive strength. Why does the NCAA think it is fair to girls or to women competing in sports to expect them to compete against individuals who were born biologically male? And is the NCAA concerned about some of the results we're seeing? For example, Connecticut high school track, where biological males are setting record after record after record in girls track and winning the championships. Is that fair to the girls and to the women who had been competing in the sports?
Senator, first of all, as you point out, this is a very challenging issue, and the member schools of the association have worked very hard to try and not make it a political issue, and rather to be aligned as closely as possible with the Olympic movement, with what goes on in the both USA Olympics and the International Olympics. So roughly about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer, the association adopted a policy that both tries to strike the balance between both an inclusive position allowing student athletes to have an opportunity to participate, but also strikes the balance with fairness. Much in agreement with what you were just saying, trying to find the fairest playing field for competition. The conclusion was that student athletes in NCAA competition who are transgendered women, for example, are allowed to compete, but only after they've been under a doctor's care for no less than a year and have had testosterone suppression treatments that have lowered their, their testosterone levels to be functionally equivalent of a woman. The cases you cite in Connecticut, while I don't know the medical circumstances of those athletes, but based on what I've read, they would not have been allowed to compete in NCAA championships. Our policies align with those of the Olympic Committee. We're also monitoring very closely, and indeed working with the IOC around some of the research you cited so that we can modify as need be our policies, recognizing differences on a sport-by-sport basis. The IOC right now has instructed all the sport federations to look at extant research and other research that may need to be done to find out whether or not there can be fair competitions in individual sports because they utilize different muscle mass and, and strength skills. So we've been constantly trying to stay abreast of the science and make sure that we're striking a balance where we don't put women athletes at a disadvantage while still trying to provide an inclusive environment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.